At 2:47 p.m., Miami crane operator Tom Rivers lifted container CHX 4471 off the Royal Caribbean Majesty. But instead of loading it onto the ship, he secretly rerouted millions in criminal organization funds to warehouse B-17. By evening, the cruise sailed toward Cozumel with an empty hold, while Tom clocked out like any other day. But here's the shocking part. The GPS tracker Tom left behind would expose a massive maritime smuggling ring in Florida, implicating port officials, organized crime members, and even shipping executives. What he uncovered could bring the entire operation crashing down and make him the most wanted man in the state. Hit subscribe and smash like, because once you see how Tom pulled off this audacious heist, you won't believe what happens next. Let's dive into Florida's wildest maritime crime story. Let me take you to the exact moment when everything went wrong. It's 2:43 p.m. on Memorial Day weekend. Tom Rivers is 60 FT up in crane cab number 7, sweat dripping down his face despite the air conditioning. His hands are shaking as he positions container CHX 4471, filled with $2.8 million in cartel cash, over warehouse B-17. Through his side mirror, he sees Victor Clove, the organization's enforcer, climbing the crane ladder with a weapon. Through his radio, he hears DEA agent Maria Gonzalez. "We have eyes on the suspect, moving to intercept." His friend Carlos is waiting below with the truck engine running. Tom has exactly 90 seconds to complete the most dangerous theft in Florida history before armed men from 2 different sides reach him. His 14-year-old son, Jake, is at home, possibly facing permanent paralysis without the experimental surgery this money will buy. His ex-wife's plane to Oregon leaves in 6 hours. The heist begins at PortMiami. As Victor reaches the crane platform, Tom makes his choice. He drops the container, not gently as protocol requires, but fast and hard. The impact triggers every emergency alarm in the port. In the chaos of sirens, smoke, and running security guards, Tom has maybe 30 seconds to climb down and disappear. But Victor's waiting at the bottom with his weapon drawn. Now you're probably wondering, how the hell did a regular port worker end up stealing millions from organized crime, while federal agents and enforcers hunt him down? Well, this insane story started 3 weeks earlier with something that seemed completely innocent. Tom was eating lunch in his truck when his phone rang. "Dad, the doctor says, if I don't get this surgery soon, I might be in a wheelchair forever." Jake's voice cracked. Tom felt his stomach drop. "How soon, buddy?" 8 weeks, Dad. I'm scared." 8 weeks to find $280,000 for experimental spinal surgery. His credit cards were maxed, house behind on payments, working double shifts just to survive. "Don't worry, Jake. I'm going to fix this." That afternoon, container CHX 471 arrived, marked VIP catering supplies for the Royal Caribbean Majesty. Tom had loaded food containers for 12 years. He knew exactly how much they should weigh. This one weighed $8,000 labi. Legitimate food containers never exceeded 2,500 labi. 2 men in expensive suits arrived to supervise. Rolex watches, Italian shoes, gold teeth. These weren't cruise employees. They spoke Spanish nervously and violently. They tipped Tom $50 cash, which never happened with real food deliveries. "Something's wrong here," Tom muttered, noting the container number. That night, after his shift ended at 11 p.m., Tom drove home to his small house in Homestead. Jake was asleep on the couch, his back brace visible under his Miami Heat t-shirt. Tom's ex-wife, Maria, had left divorce papers on the kitchen counter along with a note. "Jake needs surgery. I can't afford it. If you can't help him, I'm moving to Oregon where my mother can help us. You have 30 days. Tom sat at his kitchen table with a beer and his laptop, using his port employee credentials to log into the shipping database. Officially, he was just checking manifest for tomorrow's loading schedule. Unofficially, he was about to uncover the biggest criminal operation in Florida. The VIP Catering Solutions Company listed an address in Hialeah. Tom used Google Street View to check it out. Empty lot, chain-link fence, weeds growing through cracked concrete, no building, no business, no nothing. Tom dug deeper, cross-referencing other shipments from VIP Catering Solutions over the past 6 months. The pattern that emerged made his hands shake. 18 different catering companies with similar names: luxury cruise catering, premium ship provisions, elite marine food services, all with addresses that led to empty lots, abandoned buildings, or non-existent street numbers. All shipping exclusively to Caribbean destinations known for offshore banking and money laundering. All billing cruise lines between $100,000 and $500,000 per shipment for specialty provisions. Discovering the fake catering companies most damning, every single container weighed between 6,000 and 12,000 deloy. Tom had loaded thousands of legitimate food containers. The average weight was 1 to 900 for refrigerated goods, 2,000 lb maximum for dry goods with heavy packaging. Tom wasn't looking at food shipments. He was looking at something much more valuable and much more dangerous. Cash. Millions of dollars in cash being smuggled through cruise ship routes to Caribbean money laundering operations. Holy shit, Tom whispered, staring at his laptop screen. Each container represented enough money to pay for Jake's surgery 50 times over, maybe 100 times over. A car door slammed outside. Tom's heart jumped. He quickly closed his laptop and peered through the blinds. Just his neighbor coming home from a late shift, but the paranoia was already setting in. He was looking at something he wasn't supposed to see. Tom logged back into the system and started documenting everything. Container numbers, shipping companies, weights, destinations, dates. If this was what he thought it was, a massive money laundering operation using cruise ships as transport, then he was holding evidence of the biggest financial crime in Florida history. The next morning, Tom arrived at work early to observe another suspicious shipment, container CHX 4472, also from VIP Catering Solutions, weighing 9,200 lb. Same two guys in suits, same nervous energy, same cash tip. But this time, security guard Miguel Santos walked into the records office while Tom was deep in restricted database files he had no business accessing. "Working late again, Tom? System giving you trouble?" Tom's heart nearly exploded. He quickly alt-tabbed to legitimate maintenance reports, hoping Miguel hadn't seen the shipping manifests on his screen. "Just updating some container logs, Miguel. You know how backed up we get during cruise season?" Miguel nodded and grabbed his coffee from the break room. "Yeah, these rich people and their fancy food. See you tomorrow, Tom." After Miguel left, Tom sat there shaking, realizing what he'd done. Every database access was logged with timestamps and user credentials. Tomorrow morning, it would show that Tom Rivers had been accessing restricted financial shipping records at 2:47 a.m. He had maybe 8 hours before they traced the unauthorized access back to him. Tom made a decision that would change everything. Instead of running scared, he decided to get smarter about his investigation. Over the next week, Tom used legitimate maintenance schedules to access different terminals throughout PortMiami. He volunteered for overtime shifts, equipment inspections, system updates, anything that gave him access to shipping data without raising suspicions. What he discovered was staggering in scope. The operation was processing approximately $200 million annually through 18 fake catering companies. The containers weren't filled with cocaine or heroin like he'd initially thought. They were filled with shrink-wrapped bricks of cash, drug money that needed to be cleaned through legitimate business transactions before being deposited in offshore accounts. The cruise lines were complicit. They were being paid $500,000 per shipment to transport the containers without questions, inspection, or proper documentation. The containers would be loaded in Miami, transported to Caribbean ports, then disappear during unloading. The money would surface days later in Cayman Islands banks, Panamanian investment funds, or Costa Rican real estate purchases. Port officials were getting monthly payments of $50,000 to ensure smooth operations. Customs inspectors were being paid to look the other way. DEA agents were being fed false information to keep investigations focused elsewhere. Tom realized he was looking at a criminal conspiracy that reached into every level of Miami's maritime industry. But he also realized something else. This was his chance to save Jake. Tom decided to run a small test. During a routine loading operation, he deliberately diverted a container worth approximately $50,000 to warehouse B-17 instead of its intended cruise ship. The warehouse was scheduled for demolition in 3 months and was rarely inspected. His plan worked perfectly. The container sat in storage for 3 days before anyone noticed. When they finally discovered the error, it was written off as a clerical mistake. No investigation, no disciplinary action, No questions asked. Tom had just proven that the system was vulnerable, but his personal crisis was accelerating. Maria called him at work. The specialist in Portland can do Jake's surgery for $280,000. It has to be paid in advance, and we have to move there for the recovery period. I'm filing custody modification papers next week. That same day, Port Supervisor Elena Martinez called Tom into her office. Elena was smart, thorough, and suspicious by nature. She'd been tracking the unusual number of routing errors in Tom's section. Tom, this is the third major shipping mistake this month. Are you having problems with the new computer system? Personal issues affecting your work? Tom forced himself to stay calm. Elena, I've been working double shifts for 2 months. These cruise ships all start looking the same when you're pulling 16-hour days. Maybe I need to cut back on the overtime. Elena studied his face. Your performance reviews have always been excellent, but these kinds of errors cost the port money and credibility. I need to know you're focused. I'm focused on doing my job and supporting my family. Elena nodded but didn't look convinced. Take tomorrow off, get some rest, come back ready to work without mistakes. Tom realized he needed help. He couldn't pull off anything bigger by himself. He approached his friend Carlos Mendez, a truck driver who transported legitimate supplies between the port and local businesses. Carlos was honest, reliable, and desperate for extra money to support his own family. Carlos, what if I told you there was a way to make some serious extra money helping families who need medical care? Carlos was skeptical. They were sitting in Carlos's garage drinking Budweisers after Carlos's shift. What kind of money, Tom? And what kind of help? The kind that could change everything for people like us? You're talking crazy, man. What's going on with you? Tom showed Carlos photos of Jake in his back brace, medical bills totaling $280,000, insurance denial letters. My son is going to be paralyzed for life unless I find this money in the next 6 weeks. The insurance company won't pay for experimental treatment. Carlos's expression softened. He had 3 kids of his own. Tom, I feel for you, but what are you talking about? I'm talking about taking money from people who have stolen billions from families like ours. The next night, Tom decided to install a GPS tracker inside another suspicious container to map the complete money laundering route. Container CH64473, weighing 7,800 lubby, supposedly containing premium seafood for a celebrity cruise ship. Tom waited until 2 a.m. when only the skeleton security crew was on duty. He used his maintenance access to enter warehouse B15, where the container was stored overnight. The GPS tracker was a small magnetic device he bought online for $200, designed for tracking stolen vehicles, perfect for container surveillance. As Tom was attaching the tracker inside the container's locking mechanism, he heard footsteps echoing through the warehouse. Heavy boots, multiple people speaking Russian-accented English. Tom flattened himself against the side of the container, barely breathing. The footsteps got closer. A flashlight beam swept across the warehouse floor, passing inches from where Tom was hiding. Check all containers scheduled for morning loading, a voice commanded. Someone has been asking questions. Someone with access. Tom recognized the voice. Victor Clove, head of security for the entire operation. Tom had seen him around the port, but never knew his role in the criminal enterprise. Victor and 2 other men spent 10 agonizing minutes inspecting containers, checking locks, reviewing shipping documentation. Tom's legs were cramping from staying motionless, and sweat was dripping into his eyes, but he didn't dare move. Finally, the footsteps receded. Tom waited another 15 minutes before emerging from his hiding spot, hands shaking so badly he could barely walk. The next morning, Victor began questioning port workers about unauthorized personnel in warehouse areas after hours. Tom realized someone had seen something. Maybe security cameras he'd missed. Maybe an informant. Maybe just bad luck. But Victor was systematically interviewing every employee with after-hours access. Tom was scheduled to meet with Victor in 2 days. The medical pressure was intensifying. Dr. Martinez called with devastating news. Jake's spinal deterioration is accelerating faster than we anticipated. The experimental treatment window is closing rapidly. We need to begin within 4 weeks, not 8, and the cost has increased to $340,000 due to additional pre-surgical procedures required. Tom felt like he was drowning. 4 weeks, $340,000, and a cartel enforcer who suspected him of espionage. Tom decided to attempt a bigger theft, a container worth approximately $200,000. But this time, he planned meticulously. He spent 3 days mapping security camera blind spots during shift changes. He created fake maintenance work orders that justified his presence in restricted areas during specific time windows. He timed his operation during peak loading chaos when supervisors were overwhelmed, managing 4 simultaneous cruise ship departures. Most importantly, he recruited Carlos as a lookout, communicating through encrypted radio apps on their smartphones. The target was container CHX 41474, weighing $8,400, supposedly containing gourmet restaurant equipment for a Norwegian cruise ship bound for Jamaica. The operation began at 1:30 p.m. during the busiest part of the loading schedule. Tom used his crane to move CHX 41474 toward the Norwegian ship, but instead of loading it directly, he diverted it to warehouse B-17 during a carefully timed security camera gap. Carlos was positioned in his truck near warehouse B-17, monitoring radio communications and watching for unexpected security patrols. Everything was going perfectly until Elena Martinez made an unscheduled inspection of the loading operations. "Tom, what's the status on container CHX 474? The Norwegian manifest shows it should have been loaded 20 minutes ago." Tom was physically positioning the container inside warehouse B-17 when Elena appeared. His heart rate spiked to probably 200 beats per minute. "Elena, this container was leaking some kind of fluid. Looked like spoiled seafood or something. I moved it to quarantine for inspection before putting it on a passenger ship." Elena approached the container to investigate. Tom had prepared for this contingency by spilling vegetable oil near the container base to simulate a leak. "I smell it too," Elena said, examining the fake leak. "Good catch, Tom. We can't risk food poisoning on a cruise ship. I'll call the health inspector." "I'll handle the paperwork and cleanup," Tom volunteered. "No need to involve health services if it's just a minor leak." Elena nodded and moved on to other inspections, giving Tom precious minutes to complete his diversion and create documentation showing the container had been rejected for health reasons. Through his investigation, Tom was learning the full scope of the criminal operation. Each container held between $8 and $15 million in shrink-wrapped cash bricks. The money belonged to 3 different cartel organizations, Colombian, Mexican, and Venezuelan, who were using the Miami port as a central laundering hub for their North American drug profits. The cruise lines were receiving $500,000 per container to transport the money without inspection. Port officials were getting $50,000 monthly retainers to facilitate smooth operations. Customs agents were being paid $25,000 per shipment to ensure containers passed through without detailed examination. The money was being transported to Caribbean banking havens, where it would be converted into legitimate investment instruments. Real estate purchases, shell company stock transactions, offshore hedge fund investments. Tom calculated that the operation was processing approximately $2.4 billion annually through the Miami port system. He also calculated that taking enough money to pay for Jake's surgery represented approximately 0.01% of their annual volume. It would be like a normal person losing a penny. Tom successfully diverted the $200,000 container, but it still wasn't enough for Jake's surgery. The operation had gone smoothly except for one terrifying detail. Victor discovered Tom's GPS tracker inside container CH473. Victor called Tom directly on his personal cell phone. "Mr. Rivers, this is Victor Koslov from Port Security. I'd like to discuss some equipment irregularities with you personally. Can you meet me at warehouse B-17 tonight at 8 p.m.? Tom's blood turned to ice water. Victor knew about warehouse B-17. Victor knew Tom was involved. This wasn't a coincidental security meeting. This was a confrontation that could end with Tom disappearing permanently. But Tom had no choice. Refusing to meet would confirm Victor's suspicions. Running would endanger Jake and Maria. His only option was to face Victor and try to convince him that Tom was just an innocent port worker caught up in something bigger. That night, Tom drove to warehouse B-17 with his hands shaking so badly he could barely steer. He'd written a letter to Jake explaining everything, sealed it in an envelope, and hidden it in his bedroom closet. If he didn't come home tonight, at least Jake would understand why his father had risked everything. Victor was waiting inside the warehouse with two other men. They weren't pointing guns at Tom, but he could see pistol bulges under their jackets. "Mr. Rivers, thank you for coming. We have a security concern that requires your expertise." Victor's voice was calm, professional, almost friendly, which somehow made it more terrifying. "Someone with access to our shipping operations has been conducting unauthorized surveillance. They've installed tracking devices. They've accessed restricted computer systems. They've been documenting activities that don't concern them." Victor paused, studying Tom's face for reactions. "You've been working at this port for 12 years. You understand technology, security systems, employee access protocols. Any ideas who might be investigating our operations?" Tom forced himself to maintain eye contact and speak steadily. "Could be DEA running an undercover operation. Could be competing organizations trying to gather intelligence. Could be a disgruntled employee looking to cause problems. All I know is containers go where the shipping manifest says they go." "Interesting theory," Victor nodded. "What about the GPS tracking device we found inside container CHX4473? GPS tracker? I don't know anything about that. Sounds like law enforcement surveillance to me." Victor studied Tom for 30 seconds. That felt like 30 hours. Finally, "Mr. Rivers, if you ever notice any unusual activity, any unauthorized personnel, any equipment that seems out of place, please contact me immediately. We value the cooperation of honest employees." "Of course, absolutely." Tom somehow made it out of that warehouse alive, but he knew he was running out of time. Victor suspected him, but didn't have proof yet. Tom realized he needed one final massive theft to get the money for Jake's surgery. Container CHX4471 was scheduled to arrive the following Saturday, Memorial Day weekend, carrying the largest single cash shipment Tom had ever seen. According to his tracking, it would contain approximately $2.8 million. This required everything Tom had learned over the past month: breaking into Victor's encrypted communication system to monitor cartel security protocols, installing an advanced keylogger on the main shipping database server to track all container movements in real time, creating a complex routing deception involving multiple false manifests and emergency maintenance protocols, coordinating with Carlos for immediate cash extraction using a specialized truck capable of handling the weight and bulk of $2.8 million in currency. Meanwhile, DEA agent Maria Gonzalez was piecing together her own investigation of the money laundering operation. Working undercover as a port inspector, she had identified the same shipping anomalies Tom had discovered. Her investigation revealed $200 million annually being processed through fake cruise catering companies, shell companies registered in 7 different countries to obscure money trails, bribery networks reaching into the highest levels of port administration, cruise line management, and federal oversight agencies. Agent Gonzalez had also identified Tom Rivers as a person of interest. His financial desperation combined with his access and technical skills made him a prime candidate for either criminal involvement or potential recruitment as an informant. Victor was implementing his own security measures. He suspected that someone with insider access was gathering intelligence on the operation, possibly for law enforcement or competing criminal organizations. He was conducting systematic background checks on all port employees with container access. He was installing additional surveillance equipment throughout the port facility. He was preparing contingency plans for violent elimination of security threats. The night before the big heist, Tom attempted to install the keylogger on the main shipping database server. This required accessing the port's central computer facility during his night shift, bypassing electronic locks, and installing sophisticated monitoring software without triggering security alerts. As Tom was working on the server installation, he heard multiple sets of footsteps approaching through the corridor. Heavy boots, multiple voices, getting closer rapidly. Tom was trapped in the server room with nowhere to hide and no plausible explanation for his presence. In desperation, he triggered the building's fire alarm system, forcing immediate evacuation of the entire facility. In the chaos of blaring alarms, flashing emergency lights, and evacuating personnel, Tom escaped unseen. But the keylogger installation was only half completed, giving him limited access to the container tracking system. Elena Martinez reviewed security footage from the past week and noticed that Tom's movement patterns throughout the port didn't match his official work assignments. He was appearing in areas where he had no legitimate business during times when he should have been elsewhere. Elena scheduled a meeting with Tom for Monday morning, the day after his planned theft of container CHX 44701. The medical crisis reached its breaking point. Jake collapsed during gym class at school and was rushed to Miami Children's Hospital. The emergency room doctor delivered devastating news. The spinal compression is accelerating rapidly. Jake has maybe 1 week before the nerve damage becomes irreversible. If he doesn't have surgery immediately, the paralysis will be permanent. Maria arrived at the hospital with airline tickets. I've scheduled Jake's surgery in Portland for next Friday. The payment has to be wired by Wednesday. We're leaving Sunday morning, whether you have the money or not. Jake was crying in his hospital bed. Dad, I don't want to move to Oregon. All my friends are here. I don't want to leave you. Tom held his son's hand and made a promise he wasn't sure he could keep. You're not going anywhere, buddy. Daddy's going to fix this. The insurance company sent their final denial letter. Experimental spinal procedures remain outside coverage parameters. Appeal process has been exhausted. No further review will be considered. Victor's phone intercepts revealed that someone was planning to steal container CHX 4471 during Saturday's Memorial Day operations. He didn't know who, but he was prepared to use lethal force to protect the shipment. Victor positioned additional armed security throughout the port facility. He installed real-time monitoring equipment on container CHX 44701. Specifically, he prepared kill orders for anyone who threatened the operation. Tom realized this wasn't just theft anymore. This was war. Memorial Day weekend arrived with 4 major cruise ships departing simultaneously from PortMiami. The port operated at maximum chaos, exactly the confusion Tom needed to cover his operation. Maria arrived at Tom's house with packed suitcases and airline tickets. Jake's surgery is scheduled in Portland for next Friday. The deposit has to be paid by Wednesday. We're leaving tomorrow morning at 8 a.m., whether you have the money or not. Jake broke down crying. Dad, please don't let me go. I want to stay with you. I don't want to be paralyzed. The insurance company's customer service department sent their final recorded message. Mr. Rivers, experimental procedures remain outside coverage parameters. No payment assistance is available. This case is now closed. Saturday morning, container CHX 471 was scheduled for loading onto the Royal Caribbean Majesty, departing at 4 p.m. for Cozumel. Carlos positioned his specialized truck at warehouse B17. Tom's crane was assigned to handle high-value cargo during the peak loading period. All security cameras had been mapped. All guard rotations had been timed. DEA surveillance had identified the full scope of the criminal operation. $200 million in cash and drugs moved through Miami port annually. The network involved corrupt cruise line employees, port officials, customs agents, and federal oversight personnel. 3 other major Florida ports were similarly compromised. Tom Rivers was now confirmed as either a criminal participant or potential informant. Victor's final security briefing identified multiple threats to the operation: possible DEA surveillance, competing cartel intelligence gathering, and insider espionage from port employees. He was specifically suspicious of unusual container routing errors that had occurred over the past month. Tom sat in his truck in the port parking lot, watching Jake struggle to walk from the car to the hospital entrance for his final medical evaluation. In 6 hours, he would either save his son's life or destroy his own. Overhearing intercepted cartel communications, Tom learned that Victor was planning to eliminate security risks after Saturday's shipment. Anyone who knew too much about the operation wouldn't survive the weekend. Agent Gonzalez's team received final operational orders. Move in during tomorrow's port operations. Intelligence suggests they're planning something significant with a Saturday CHX 44701 shipment. Saturday, 1:15 p.m. Tom began his shift knowing this was life or death. Every decision in the next 4 hours would determine whether Jake would walk again, whether Tom would see his family again, whether he would survive the day. At 1:22 p.m., Carlos positioned his truck at warehouse B17, monitoring radio communications and preparing for immediate extraction. Container CH4471 arrived under maximum security. Victor's personal supervision, 2 additional armed guards, electronic monitoring equipment. At 1:28 p.m., container CHX4471 was delivered to Tom's loading area. According to his intelligence, it contained $2.8 million in shrink-wrapped cash bricks, enough money to save Jake and dozens of other children. At 1:35 p.m., Tom initiated the most complex container diversion of his criminal career. He used pre-programmed crane sequences that appeared routine to observers, but systematically moved CHX 471 toward warehouse B17 instead of the Royal Caribbean Majesty. He exploited a 4-minute security camera gap during the shift change rotation. He created a cascade of false emergency maintenance alerts that distracted Victor's security team. He implemented triple redundant routing protocols to ensure the container reached its destination regardless of interference. At 2:15 p.m., Victor personally inspected Tom's crane operations and noticed that the timing was too precise, too professional. He radioed his security team. "Watch Rivers closely. Something feels wrong." Tom overheard the radio communication and realized he was blown, but the container transfer was only half completed. He couldn't abort the operation with Jake's surgery depending on this money. At 2:28 p.m., DEA agent Maria Gonzalez arrived with backup agents surrounding warehouse B17. Tom saw the federal vehicles through his crane cab window and knew he had minutes before they discovered the cash. But container CHX4471 was suspended between crane and warehouse. He couldn't stop now. Victor's armed team moved toward Tom's position from the east. DEA agents breached the warehouse B17 perimeter from the west. Tom had to complete the container placement with hostile forces closing from both directions. Carlos started his truck engine, ready for immediate escape or immediate arrest. With law enforcement and cartel security converging on his position, Tom activated the port's emergency lockdown protocols, sealing critical areas and triggering automatic security responses. He used the crane's PA system to broadcast false security alerts, creating confusion and misdirection. He created a smoke screen using legitimate maintenance equipment. He coordinated the final container placement through coded hand signals with Carlos. At 2:43 p.m., Tom was operating crane number 7 to place container CHX 4471 inside warehouse B17 when Victor appeared directly below him with a sniper rifle through the crane cab's reinforced window. Victor aimed directly at Tom's head. Tom had to complete the container placement while staring down the barrel of a high-powered rifle, knowing that one wrong movement would mean instant death. "Stop the container or I shoot," Victor shouted over the noise of port machinery. Tom made his choice. He dropped container CHX 4471, the final 6 FP, not gently as safety protocols required, but fast and hard. The impact triggered every automatic emergency response system in the port. Alarms wailed, smoke filled the area, emergency lights flashed. Security personnel came running from every direction. In the chaos, Tom had maybe 30 seconds to climb down from the crane and disappear. But Victor was waiting at the bottom with his weapon still drawn. As emergency alarms wailed and smoke-filled warehouse B17, Tom climbed down from crane number 7 to find Victor Clove, DEA agent Maria Gonzalez, Carlos, and $2.8 million in cartel cash, all converging on the same location. His son's life, his freedom, and his survival all depended on the next 60 seconds. "Tom Rivers, DEA, step away from the container and put your hands where I can see them." Agent Gonzalez had her service weapon drawn, but she wasn't pointing it at Tom. She was pointing it at Victor, who still had his rifle aimed at Tom's head. Victor snarled, "You American fool! You have no idea what you're dealing with? That container belongs to people who kill entire families for much less than this." Instead of denying everything, Tom made a desperate gambit. "Agent Gonzalez, open that container. You'll find enough cash to save 1,000 kids like my son. This isn't theft, it's justice." Agent Gonzalez knew about Jake's medical condition. She'd been monitoring Tom's financial desperation as part of her investigation, but she also knew the container held evidence of the largest money laundering operation in Florida history. Carlos arrived with his truck as planned, but seeing armed federal agents and cartel soldiers, he faced his own choice. Abandon his friend or become part of something bigger than a simple theft. "Tom's the most honest guy I know," Carlos declared. "If he says these people are destroying families, I believe him." Tom revealed that he'd been documenting the entire smuggling operation for weeks. GPS tracking data from multiple container shipments, photographs of cartel operatives at the port, financial records linking cruise lines to money laundering, names and dates of corrupt port officials. "I've got everything," Tom said. 18 fake catering companies, $200 million annually. Bribes to cruise executives, port officials, customs agents. It's all documented. Victor realized the operation was blown. He made a final desperate play. "Everyone walks away now or I start shooting. The container goes on the next ship and we pretend this never happened." Agent Gonzalez could arrest Tom for theft and let the criminal enterprise continue operating. Or she could recognize that one father's desperate crime had exposed a network that had destroyed thousands of families. For 30 seconds, 3 different factions faced off in Warehouse B-17. Victor with his rifle, Agent Gonzalez with her service weapon, Tom standing between them next to $2.8 million in cartel cash that could save his son's life or get them all killed. Port security alarms continued wailing. More DEA vehicles surrounded the warehouse. Victor spoke rapidly into his radio in Russian. Tom realized this was either the moment he saved Jake or the last moment of his life. While Tom was in DEA custody, his pre-programmed evidence release system activated automatically. 23 news organizations received complete files documenting the smuggling operation. The FBI Financial Crimes Unit got real-time access to cartel money laundering accounts. The Coast Guard received shipping routes and schedules for future operations. U.S. Customs received names of corrupt officials in multiple Florida ports. "Tom, you committed grand theft," Agent Gonzalez said during his interrogation. "But you also handed us the biggest drug bust in Florida history. We're willing to discuss complete immunity in exchange for your cooperation." The DEA investigation revealed the full scope of the criminal conspiracy. $200 million in cash moved through Florida ports annually. 47 children had died from cartel drugs that passed through Tom's terminal, while executives bought yachts with the profits. Cruise line executives had received $8 million in bribes to facilitate smuggling. Port officials had enabled trafficking that destroyed entire Miami neighborhoods. Victor was captured while attempting to escape with a briefcase containing $12 million in cash. His arrest led to the biggest RICO prosecution in South Florida history. Within hours, the story dominated national news. Port worker stops $200 million drug operation. Father risks everything to expose cartel smuggling. The crane operator who broke the cruise ship drug ring. Public opinion split dramatically. Parents across the country supported Tom's actions to save his disabled son. Law enforcement officials debated whether theft could ever be justified by exposing greater crimes. Port workers feared cartel retaliation, but admired Tom's courage. Federal agents discovered the corruption extended throughout Florida's entire maritime industry. A network of 8 major ports involved in similar operations. Cruise line industry bribes worth $100 million annually. Drug trafficking affecting every Caribbean shipping route. Money laundering through dozens of legitimate tourism businesses. Prosecutors faced an unprecedented legal dilemma. Tom had clearly committed grand theft, but he had also exposed crimes that saved thousands of lives. Charging him would undermine whistleblower protections and send a message that exposing corruption wasn't worth the risk. Not charging him appeared to endorse vigilante justice in breaking federal laws. Jake's story went viral on social media. Boy gets life-saving surgery after father exposes drug cartel. Port workers organized rallies. Tom Rivers is a hero. Medical professionals testified about families who would be saved by his actions. Cruise passengers demanded better security to protect their vacations from drug money contamination. Federal prosecutors offered Tom an extraordinary plea deal. Complete immunity from theft charges if he testified against cartel and cruise line executives. Witness protection for his family during the trials. Full medical coverage for Jake's surgeries using seized cartel assets. New identities and relocation assistance after the trials concluded. Agent Gonzalez became Tom's strongest advocate. This man handed us $1 billion criminal enterprise on a silver platter. He deserves protection, not prosecution. Carlos received official recognition for his role in exposing the operation and became a key witness in subsequent federal investigations. The trials began within 6 months. Cruise line executives were arrested on money laundering charges. Port officials were indicted for accepting bribes and enabling drug trafficking. Cartel leadership faced RICO charges carrying life sentences. Emergency federal legislation was passed requiring real-time GPS tracking of all cruise ship cargo, independent federal oversight of port loading operations, criminal penalties for executives who facilitate drug trafficking, and comprehensive whistleblower protections for maritime workers. Victor cooperated with prosecutors to reduce his sentence, revealing the complete cartel hierarchy and money laundering networks across the southeastern United States. Port officials faced decades in federal prison for enabling drug trafficking. Cruise line executives faced RICO charges for systematic money laundering conspiracy. On the day of the most important trial, Tom received an anonymous message. "Your testimony ends our Miami operation, but cartels have long memories. Family first, Mr. Rivers." Despite the threats, Tom testified for 3 days, providing evidence that led to historic convictions. 31 cartel members sentenced to life in federal prison. $500 million recovered from seized drug operations and offshore accounts. Victor sentenced to life without parole. Agent Gonzalez promoted to head the new Maritime Drug Enforcement Division. Jake's experimental spinal surgery, funded entirely by seized cartel assets, was completely successful. On the day of Tom's sentencing hearing, Jake walked into the federal courtroom without crutches, without his back brace, completely healed. Federal Judge Patricia Williams delivered Tom's sentence. "Mr. Rivers, you committed theft under federal law, but you also exposed crimes that saved thousands of lives and protected countless families from drug-related destruction. This court sentences you to time served plus 2,000 hours of community service. Your actions prevented immeasurable harm to innocent people." Tom was hired as director of port security for the reformed PortMiami operations with a salary of $120,000 annually, finally reflecting his expertise and the value of his contribution. Maria dropped all custody proceedings. The family reunited in a new home provided through the Federal Witness Protection Program. The reformed port implemented revolutionary security protocols. All cargo tracked by GPS from origin to final destination. Random inspections by independent federal teams. Worker advisory board with veto power over suspicious shipments. Executive compensation tied directly to security compliance metrics.